Chile, unique in Latin America for its tradition of democracy, has made history. For the first time, a left-wing president has come to power through the ballot box. President Salvador Allende. His sweeping program of free healthcare and education, supported by nationalization of its industries, has angered foreign corporations and Chile's powerful upper class.
Ustedes han sido convocados para corregir la injusta división internacional del trabajo basada en un concepto deshumanizado del hombre.
Here up in the Andes is what Chile is all about. Inside these mountains is the copper, which makes the difference between national survival and national disaster.
The whole purpose of anything that we in the Washington office did was to try to protect our investment. But what the boys were doing in Chile met with the approval of the CIA.
It's rumored that the current US administration has led various attempts to covertly undermine Allende's presidency. Despite this, Allende's support keeps increasing with each election. On Tuesday, the 11th of September 1973, the Chilean armed forces attacked the Moneda presidential palace with Sherman tanks and British-made Hawker Hunter jets. The air raid lasted just under an hour, devastating the palace. Before the bombing began, Allende broadcast to the nation.
Trabajadores de mi patria, tengo fe en Chile y su destino. Sigan ustedes sabiendo que mucho más temprano que tarde, de nuevo abrirán las grandes alamedas por donde pase el hombre libre para construir una sociedad mejor.
Allende died in the Moneda.
The junta has hurriedly formed an information service to try and convince the world that the coup was necessary. The new leader of Chile, General Pinochet, gave a press conference.
Chile está en este momento en estado de guerra interior.
A steady stream of gunfire can still be heard coming mainly from the shanty towns that surround the city. The army are using the curfew to cordon off these poor areas and search them house by house. The results of the firing at night can be seen when the curfew is lifted in the morning. We were told that these bodies are the results of executions carried out by the army during the house-to-house searches. This nun told us she'd been collecting the bodies that were floating down Santiago's main river each morning.
In the time we were there, between 400 and 500 people were shot by firing squad in groups of 10 to 37. We saw people beaten savagely. There's no refined torture techniques. They are beating people physically to death.
The bodies are dumped like these and left as a warning and an example to the local population. One wonders how long this will go on.
The fall of Allende's government and the violent aftermath of the coup have sparked immediate reactions all over the world. Mass protests lined the streets of major cities calling for solidarity demonstrations, boycotts of Chilean goods, and even reprisals against the American corporations which are believed to have supported the coup. One of the most curious actions is currently taking place in Scotland. where Rolls-Royce workers are letting the engines of Chilean hawker hunters rust in the back of the factory.
Initially, it was a moral stand that was taken by a worker in Rolls-Royce. That was Bob here, actually.
I couldn't support or do anything that would help that type of government.
So you're Bob, right?
I'm Bob. I'm Bob Fulton, yes.
It's John Stewart. Fell for that one. That's an old trick, Bob. I know it's an old trick. Hold the door, and he says, in you go. Right. Soft drink, please. What you got? You get?
Oh, that's not bad.
Ginger beer?
Right. Watch you don't trip on that. I'll put it under the table.
It's a health and safety problem, Bob. I think I'm
in health and safety. We were good at that, weren't we?
We were very good at that, Bob.
We sorted out B block, didn't we? In the oven. It was full of asbestos.
Hi, John.
How you doing? Well, there's John. I knew the shape.
Aye? Is it that good, is it? No, I didn't want to be an engineer. I was told to go and be one. Well, I needed a job. Working class people need to get jobs. And it was a good job. I learned as an apprentice like John in Rolls-Royce. And I disliked engineering from the day I went into it to the day I left. I didn't even like the feel of oil.
I was put into a tank regiment, the 7th Armoured Brigade. I was a desert rat. I wasn't in it, I never saw a desert.
This is where you got the name, Tank Commander.
Aye, right. I was with the tanks. That was my nickname, aye, that's right. That's right. Aye.
I remember it. That's what we called him, Tank Commander. Don't you start with any war stories. Don't start with the war stories. Just a minute. We've got to get home before 8 o'clock.
My father was a Chilean journalist in exile living in Belgium. And when I was a kid, we used to go to Solidarity Night. And I remember at the start of each night, they'd go through all the solidarity and protests going on in each country. I guess what was happening in Chile. And in Scotland, they always mention the hawker hunters stuck in a factory because of a worker's action. The idea to me that somebody had managed to defeat those planes, that was incredible. And so I just want to know what's true.
I distinctly remember that day because everything was going as normal and all the guys were working. And then Bob came round the corner and shouted, "Stuart! Stuart!"
Dictatorship, that was a red flag to a bull with me, and still is when it comes to that.
Bob was a man of great integrity. He was one of what we call the old school. He's a guy who had been in the war. He wasn't part of the swinging 60s, Bob. So he's going, "Stuart, there's Chilean engines in here."
If we can stop them, it'll save Pinochet machine gunning somebody down for the air.
He was very quick, Bob. He said, our union has a policy that we condemn the Chilean junta and the overthrowing of the democratic process in Chile. and he had to grind it all off like that. So we'll not be working on these engines. He said, in point of fact, we're going to black these engines. Black means they're in dispute and they're not to be touched by anybody. Now, I was quite excited about this because I knew Bob didn't have the authority to do this. He asked me to get a big ink marker, and we went round all the large components, and I was writing black on them.
And he wrote black on the label, tied it either onto the actual engine part that was black, or if it was sitting in one of the square pallets, he tied it onto the pallet.
So we started working our way down the various sections, and he would say, there, he would point it out, look at the card, and there was quite a lot.
In the store as well, he was climbing up now and getting the cards and saying, that's a Chile engine.
And Bob was saying to people, to fitters, these engines are black, don't work in them. And they would stop working because a shop steward had told them, no one touch these are blacked. Everybody was in the trade union, so there was no problem. They just downed tools and went and worked on something else. So eventually he was challenged. And people approached Bob carefully because he was a guy that was difficult for the management to handle sometimes.
I gave him a frightful look, if you want to put it that way.
And he was a big man, and he was robust. He came from farming stock, and he was a typical farmer type person. So the management said, oh, you can't do this, and Bob said, we're doing it, it's done.
The only option I had then was to inform the Works Committee.
These are sort of super shop stewards, you could call them. There was 6 of them and a main guy called the convener. He looked after everything.
The door opened and in comes Bob Fulton, really going, shouting, there's Chilean engines in the factory and I'm refusing to work on them.
And then before I could say any more, they were out the door and disappeared, and I was like standing in the office.
But coming in for repair means they were being in action. So these possibly could have been engines used. They bombed the palace, and here they are, getting ready to be assembled to go back out.
The blades had been checked, all the various wheels and bits crack tested. Now parts of that engine must also have been on the main build line.
Once assembled, it doesn't take many weeks for these to go up to test beds and get tested and then shipped out.
And they've been out the door because the compressor shaft's almost the last thing that goes in.
I was disappointed and annoyed that here's me, I'm Joe Soap, and if I stop this, what's going to happen to me? And that's what everybody else would be thinking, that they let it go through and worked on it. Obviously. I went back to my section and waited. And the thing's still sitting there. And you're waiting, the security come, right, here's your P45, get your locker emptied, you're out. And then I got word from Bob Somerville, nothing was happening. He says, everything was black, Bob.
What did your wife say? You told her what you did?
I didn't tell her.
You never told your wife?
No. She would probably hit me a cuff the look.
I'd never said a word. But I did think at the time I was going to get my lot. I would have been blacked all over the country, I think. The lines were blocked and no other engines could come through onto the lines either. Nothing could come through. The whole thing was blocked from B block right through to D block.
It became quite a political football at the time.
Let me explain the position. First of all, as we sit here, there are men and women being tortured to death by the fascist secret police, solely because they've been active trade unionists, socialists, liberals and Democrats. Now, we believe in solidarity, and our way of expressing it is to stop arms for Chile, particularly these hawker hunters which bombed the president's palace. Now, about work, I'm very strongly of the view that we should be exporting peaceful engineering products, not arms. And that's the view of many engineers, and I've been an engineer myself.
Even people that weren't very political, with the information they had, they weren't for budging an inch. And the union had the power to do that then.
We voted unanimously to keep the blacking.
The management kept having meetings and meetings. We broke people up for Derby to talk to us. And Peter was the kind of person that just sat and went, no, no.
We've highlighted to the world the atrocities that have taken place in Chile and how this government has handled itself. We can hold our heads up proudly.
Peter and my father were summoned down to London to the union head offices and told, this stops, you know.
Eventually it was the executive that he'd bummers doing in London and the trade union movement decided that we'll let these Chile engines go.
So instruction combined with the management saying, look, we need to get this stuff out of the road. We came to an agreement based on that we would slap the engines together, put them in crates and put them outside.
It was agreed that no one who had strong convictions that this was the wrong thing to do would be forced to do it.
So the black was, I would say, semi-lifted or 3/4 lifted anyway, because there was some of us like myself that said, no, we're not touching them.
I'll tell you something else. See when we did slap them together, as John said, as far as I'm aware, you lads contacted the transport union. The local union guys would not shift them, and if they didn't shift them, no one could really shift them. So they were basically out there to rot. Although they were in a box and sealed, if you leave them a month, corrosion starts to set in. Certainly 6 months, you've got a real problem. A year, they become useless. You can't fly an engine anywhere in America or Britain unless it's been tested under civil aviation rules. In order to test an engine, you take it from the factory up to the test beds, which was 2 miles outside the factory, give the stamp of authority and send it back. We hadn't tested the engines.
Este magnífico ejemplo solidario fue un estímulo trascendental en la campaña mundial y en la lucha heroica de nuestro pueblo en el interior del país. He venido a agradecer a los trabajadores de la Rolls-Royce que se negaron a reparar los motores para los buques Hunter que bombardearon al Palacio de la Moneda, a las poblaciones y a la fábrica.
To be honest, you think you were royalty. They were so pleased and thankful for what we'd done. All we'd done was black engines, you know that. You know, we got hundreds and hundreds of letters of support, and a lot of it was people wanting them to come and talk at this bit, come down south. You couldn't go everywhere, you know.
I remember the case of Dr. Sheila Cassidy, who was arrested for attending to the wounds of a resistance fighter. Particularly her drawings of her tied to a metal bedstead where she was tortured. That sticks clearly in my mind. It gave a boost to our boycott.
I was tortured with electrical shocks on 3 separate occasions.
The British ambassador was recalled from Chile in protest, and the Chilean embassy seemed deeply worried.
Mr. Callaghan has demanded that your government hold an inquiry into this whole thing.
Yes.
Do you think the Chilean government will do that?
I'm sure they will. Our president has given strict orders to suppress all sort of and of torture.
There's 4 engines that have stayed until the end, until 78. But there were 8 engines altogether in the factory, and 4 of them leave after 1 year. Do you have any memory of that, of 4 engines leaving early?
No.
The Chilean Air Force sues Rolls-Royce to confirm that the engines in Scotland are legally the property of the Chilean Air Force, and therefore there's no reason they should be kept in Scotland, and anybody who does anything to stop that would be breaking the law. Does that, yeah, that must get passed on to you at some point.
That would impress us in the slightest.
When I was a kid, my father would point the engines out. Now, I suspect my father had an idea at this point that the engines were going to get taken.
Yeah, but I was that feeling, because your dad used to say, I'll watch them from my backyard.
That's right.
I'll keep my eye on them from my backyard.
So one morning I came into work and we heard that the Chilean engines had been stolen at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, that was cloak and dagger stuff, that. They were moved during the night.
The police said they would investigate it, but nothing ever came to light that I'm aware of.
I don't know whether it was cowboy drivers or drivers that couldn't care less.
So they disappeared. Where they went, no one really knew at that point. You know, there was all sorts of mad theories about they were taken back to Chile, they were dropped in the ocean.
They'd said to me, go up and stop them. I would have gone up to the gate and stopped. I'd have had to go at it anyway, because that's what I believed in. That's what I believed in. I still believe now.
I think the number plates on the lorries were false.
There was a scooter, one a taxi, and one like a private car, and it was from all over the country.
No, that's got to be the start. That's got to be the military. No one else would do that.
But that was the numbers that was in the log at the gate with the security.
The factory that we wanted had been won. They'd been stopped, had been highlighted. They were useless, they were rusty, they weren't put together properly, they hadn't been tested. Generally speaking, they don't like engines hanging about. You know, there's aircraft on ground is an expression used in the aircraft industry, AOG. So when a customer wants an engine, he will try and get it as quick as possible.
Okay.
If it's hanging about, it's costing him money.
So 4 years was too long then.
So I'm going back to Chile next month. I don't know how much I can find, but if you had like specific questions you want answered, what are the big gaps for you? What's missing? What impact did you think you guys have at the time?
To the people in Chile?
Yeah.
Well, I would say that obviously they didn't know anything about it until...
I would have presumed, because of what was happening in Chile, that they wouldn't know. But that was immaterial to our decision.
En los archivos de Londres encontré toda la parte británica, pero lo que falta es toda la parte chilena.
Sí.
Y así que no hay ley que dice que después de 30 o 40 años tiene que transferir su...
No, hay una ley que dice que cada 5 años todos los órganos del Estado tienen que traspasar su archivo a un archivo público, nacional. menos los militares y el Ministerio de Defensa. Pinochet perdió el plebiscito del año 88 y tenía un año para entregar el poder. En ese lapso, en 2 meses después, sacó esta ley que permitía destruir los archivos del Ministerio de Defensa y de la Fuerza Armada. Entonces yo creo que ya estaba tomando resguardo para eliminar el registro histórico de sus crímenes en el fondo. Pero como son muy legalistas, sacaron una ley para destruirlo. Y yo creo que en ese año se pusieron a quemar como locos.
Pero me imagino que en ese tiempo se sabía al dentro de la Fuerza Aérea.
Claro. No, sí, yo creo que fue un tema muy espinudo dentro de la Fuerza Aérea. Porque yo creo que los chilenos, la Fuerza Aérea se sentía víctima aquí. Víctima de Escocia, víctima de los trabajadores. Ellos tenían el derecho sobre esos motores. Entonces, para ellos no es algo criminal. Ellos fueron las víctimas de este acto, ¿me entienden? En su mentalidad. Realmente nadie conoce esa historia. Entonces, hay que buscar las personas que intervinieron ahí. Y yo creo que no ha habido un esfuerzo por buscarlo porque es desconocida.
Fernando Rojas Bender. Soy general del aire de la Fuerza Aérea de Chile, ex comandante de la Fuerza Aérea. Específicamente después del pronunciamiento militar de 1973, la Fuerza Aérea ya tenía y el gobierno de Chile ya había comprado una cantidad más de Hawker Hunter de la empresa de Hawker Siddeley, que estaban siendo refurbished en Inglaterra. El plan era traerlo como se traían todos los aviones en ese tiempo desde Europa en buques desarmados, que era la forma más fácil y más segura. Pero a raíz del pronunciamiento militar se producen reacciones políticas en muchos países del mundo y empezamos a buscar una fórmula cómo traer el Hawker Hunter. Desde Londres en vuelos. Siempre con avión de combate nunca tiene mucho exceso de combustible. No están construidos para volar grandes distancias, ¿sí? Era algo que tenía muchos riesgos. Tuvieron que usar el estanque ese que nos daba 8 minutos más para cruzar el Atlántico. Todos los pilotos del grupo ahí opinamos para ponerle Operación Atlantes. Yo llevaba la navegación y ellos me seguían a mí, porque no teníamos otro tipo de navegación. Había gran parte del trayecto que era solamente por navegación estimada. Confiando mucho en el Rolls Royce. Un motor que no fallaba. Y yo siempre decía, el motor no sabe si está volando sobre el agua o sobre tierra. No hay que preocuparse. Llegamos sin novedad a Chile. Sin problemas mecánicos ninguno. Era todo un éxito. Pero después embargan a Chile todo lo que sea armamento. Entonces, por eso ya esa era ya una necesidad de sacarlos de ahí.
¿Pero usted puede entender la motivación de boicotear a ustedes?
Política.
Han pasado 40 años, pareciera ser mucho tiempo, pero bueno, si uno lo mira como historia, es casi ayer.
Yo era miembro de la Fuerza Aérea, era oficial de la Fuerza Aérea y no militábamos en ningún partido político. Sin embargo, la elección de Allende a muchos de nosotros nos dio la esperanza de un cambio necesario para Chile.
Quería cambiar la sociedad, poner todo patas arriba, hacer que la mayoría de la gente participara en las decisiones del gobierno.
Tú tienes que haber escuchado de tu padre y de la gente exiliada una de las formas como la reacción boicoteaba al gobierno era a través de la disposición de bienes de consumo. Sí. La famosa escasez y las colas y todas estas cosas que generaban mucha molestia.
No, desaparecieron los artículos de primera necesidad. Desapareció el pan, desapareció la harina, ¿no? Desaparecieron los medicamentos. La carne, los hacendados se llevaban los animales, se los llevaban a Argentina. Fue una lucha pero terrible, ¿no?
Y había un general de la Fuerza Aérea responsable de resolver estos problemas. Y en mi condición de economista, recién graduado, voy a trabajar con él al Ministerio de Economía. El problema era muy grave, porque, como tú entiendes, el sistema productivo fundamentalmente estaba en el sector privado. Y el sector privado hacía juego a el boicot hacia el gobierno. La táctica era no distribuir, simplemente retener los productos. Pero a esto se sumó, como estrategia, el paro de transporte. A lo largo del proceso fuimos nacionalizando las empresas grandes distribuidoras. Fueron pasando al gobierno para poder nosotros tener la capacidad de garantizar la distribución de productos a los pequeños comerciantes. Uno de los programas importantes del presidente fue el medio litro de leche por cada niño, garantizado. Y esta leche se repartía en polvo. Bueno, en algunos lugares, lo que querían boicotear esta distribución, sacaban la leche y la usaban, entre otras cosas, para marcar las canchas de fútbol. Era un problema político generado con una intencionalidad de generar malestar en la población y, por lo tanto, desafección contra el gobierno. La prueba está que inmediatamente después del golpe, todas estas cosas que estaban escondidas aparecen y se acaba la escasez de milagro.
Yo creo que uno de los factores del golpe fue la nacionalización del cobre. Indudablemente, porque eso no era solo el cobre, era parte de las inversiones de Estados Unidos en el extranjero. Le quiten sin gran compensación una de las riquezas de Estados Unidos era una cosa muy seria. Bueno, pero lo hicimos, pagamos nuestro precio. ¿Sí?
El golpe estaba anunciado, pero no sabíamos cuándo iba a ocurrir. Y justamente ese día ocurrió. Yo tenía que ir a trabajar y, digamos, en la mañana, como me levantaba a las 7 de la mañana, estaba todo lleno de militares por todas partes. Era ya la señal que sabíamos que había un golpe de Estado.
Llegamos todo el equipo médico, que éramos como 7 u 8, y decidimos quedarnos con el presidente, ¿no?
El Palacio de la Moneda era un edificio bastante antiguo. No tenía planes de defensa. Le dijo, presidente, ¿qué vamos a hacer? Entonces le dijo, yo sé lo que yo tengo que hacer, pero usted no sé qué es lo que tiene que hacer usted. Y si no se ha preocupado de saberlo, váyase donde quiera.
Y nadie se fue. Y ninguno sabía combatir, ninguno de los médicos, que teníamos estetoscopio como arma. No. Yo nunca he disparado, nada, ni deportivamente.
Me dirigí a mi lugar de trabajo. Ya habían los camiones del ejército y habían disparos, tiroteos, y la gente corría en una dirección y otra.
Nos repartimos las máscaras de gases y los cascos y esperábamos que entrara alguien a la moneda. Las paredes son de un grosor impresionante. Si bien es cierto que impiden que pase cualquier cohete o cañón sin retroceso, tampoco es posible desde dentro poder disparar.
Y yo escucho por los parlantes la voz del general Lee que decía a los pilotos que él tenía que hacer una demolición de la moneda.
Sí, lo veíamos pasar.
Y yo vi a estos Hawker Hunter, venían dos, que volaban sobre el centro mismo de Santiago. Primero, pasaban a gran velocidad, daban una vuelta y vuelven. Venía el avión y el rocket siguió como que seguía, digamos, al avión y cayó justo en el Palacio de la Moneda. Pasaron varias veces lanzando estos rockets y no sé si minutos, no sé, muy poco después, vimos que salía una hoguera de fuego desde la Moneda.
Para gente civil, ver ese tipo de maniobras militares es una cosa terrorífica.
Nunca nos imaginamos que iba a ser tan cruel. Yo creo que en la historia es difícil encontrar que un palacio de gobierno sea bombardeado por sus fuerzas militares, ¿no?
Me pueda dirigir a ustedes. La Fuerza Aérea ha bombardeado las torres de Radio Portales y Radio Corporación. Mis palabras no tienen amargura sino decepción, y serán ellas el castigo moral para los que han traicionado el juramento que hicieron. Ante estos hechos, solo me cabe decirle a los trabajadores, yo no voy a renunciar.
Nos sacaron los militares a golpes, ¿no? Nos golpearon muchísimo. Nos tendieron en la calle, ¿no? Nos amenazaron con que no iba a pasar un tanque por encima. Nos golpearon muchísimo, ¿no?
Se puso a gritar la gente, muchas mujeres que habían ahí, porque estaban trabajando. Y cuando vieron que había tanta gente que gritaba cuando venía el tanque, pararon el tanque. De ahí nos llevaron al regimiento Tacna. Había una cancha de básquetbol, de cemento. Ahí nos pusieron a distancia de metro y medio. Después llegaron unos camiones sin toldo, empezaron a llamar a los detenidos. El resultado de eso era que quedaba yo solo en el patio. De los 49 que habíamos llegado, yo quedé solo ahí. Y yo era un funcionario conocido, que trabajaba 20 años ahí, conocía a todo el mundo. Uno de ellos le dijo, de buena se salvó usted. A los que se subieron en los camiones se los llevaron a Pellegua y los fusilaron a todos. Así.
Just like that.
Todos terminamos en algunos muertos y otros terminamos en la isla Dawson, después de visitar varios sitios de detención, ¿no? Cada uno de más crueldad que el otro.
Y la Fuerza Aérea, pretendiendo dar una lección a las Fuerzas Armadas, a la Fuerza Aérea del país, inicia un gran juicio público contra nosotros, que no habíamos aceptado el golpe y que habíamos expresado simpatía por el gobierno de Allende. Nos condenaron por alta traición a la patria. Y eso obviamente lleva la pena de muerte.
En Latinoamérica no es común un golpe de Estado con esa crueldad. En el golpe de Estado en Latinoamérica va el militar y se presenta al presidente de la República y dice: usted está destituido, se va, y lo asumen. No llegan a la estupidez de bombardear el palacio, ni de bombardear poblaciones, ni todos esos vejámenes que hicieron esto.
No me envenenó el maltrato ni la decepción que genera el que muchos de los que me torturaron están en mi álbum de matrimonio. La Fuerza Aérea es muy pequeña, como te decía.
A este compañero de curso nos maltrataban con torturas torpes, como enterrar agujas en las uñas, levantarte con unos cordeles por entre las piernas para dañarte los testículos, bofetadas a cada momento, en fin, todo encaminado a que dijéramos lo que el torturador quería que dijéramos. Eso era lo más triste del asunto, que nosotros involucráramos a más personas de las Fuerzas Armadas y predijéramos nuestra conexión con este monstruo que era el comunismo internacional. Y como no lograban eso, porque en primer lugar porque no teníamos que decirles, y muchas veces, puedo decirlo con cierta vergüenza, dijimos algunas cosas para evitar la tortura.
Mientras yo estudié en la Fuerza Aérea, desde cadete hasta ser oficial, jamás escuché la palabra derechos humanos. Bueno, la presión era tal, la tortura, el castigo, ¿no es cierto?, los golpes, simulación de fusilamientos, por ejemplo. Sí. Te sacaban al pasillo y tú escuchabas los grupos de militares que se movían, después cómo cargaban las armas, pero todo esto, y disparaban, pues, pero tú estás amarrado en un patio así con vendado, no tenías idea de lo que estaba pasando, pero imagínate por la cabeza lo que va pasando, o sea, aquí me van a matar, qué sé yo.
Y yo dije, bueno, estos infelices me van a matar. Y al mismo soldado que me llevaba, yo le quité, traté de quitarle su fusil para decir, por lo menos voy a pelear antes de que me maten sin hacer nada.
Pero la irracionalidad que se cometió aquí en Chile, yo creo que superó todas esas expectativas de control, y eso de amarrar a una persona y tirarla al mar amarrada, violar mujeres con perros, poner corriente, ese tipo de cosas que, oye, son de tal nivel el grado de maldad que hay, de la transgresión de la racionalidad humana que hubo con esta gente, que es difícil de comprender. Era trágico ver gente de la Fuerza Aérea con una capacidad intelectual absolutamente reducida y comprometida. que iban a Estados Unidos a hacer un curso de vuelo, o los famosos cursos de inteligencia que se hacían en Panamá. Ahí sí que había una formación ideológica de parte de Estados Unidos para los oficiales de la Fuerza Aérea, porque llegaban absolutamente idiotizados. Ni siquiera pertenecían al sistema y ellos se sentían como representantes ya de Estados Unidos porque llegaban en un Mustang o en un Firebird de aquí a Chile. Pues.
La tortura no es solamente por la información, sino por la degradación del ser humano. Es por la humillación. Es tratar de quebrar tu identidad. De ahí en adelante la tortura solo se vuelve en un castigo, en una forma sistemática de decirme no vuelvas a hacer esto, no vuelvas a oponerte a nosotros. La información no es lo importante.
Se aprende mucho de esas situaciones, sobre todo hasta dónde llega la resistencia humana y hasta dónde llega la resistencia mental de la persona. Comentábamos muchas veces con mis compañeros de celda, somos seres olvidados del mundo, porque estamos aquí encerrados y nadie piensa en nosotros.
Escucha Chile.
Las noticias que la Junta esconde y prohíbe.
Lo que ocurre dentro de Chile y la voz de la solidaridad del mundo.
Escucha Chile.
Y nos tenían prohibido que escucháramos radio, pero teníamos una pequeñita así, y Carballo, que era técnico en comunicaciones, inventó todo un sistema de antenas con alambres que simulaban ser colgadores de ropa, cuando teníamos ropa. Y con esa antena nosotros escuchábamos en la noche la radio de Moscú. Dentro de todas estas expresiones de apoyo de todo el mundo, nos impactó mucho escuchar un día cualquiera la noticia de que trabajadores de Escocia se habían negado a reparar motores de los Hawk Hunters y que habían hecho una especie de huelga, de boicot, para evitar que fueran reparados los motores Hawk Hunters. Lo transmitió Radio Moscú. Lo dijo con todos los antecedentes, todos los detalles, y por supuesto celebrando la actitud de los obreros escoceses. Y tal vez para una radio nacional, que la dio como una intromisión indebida en estas actitudes, digamos, internacionales.
Normalmente la apagaban o la bajaban, cosa que los prisioneros no pudieran escucharla. Pero escucho la noticia de los trabajadores de Rolls Royce y para mí fue un hecho muy importante porque había gente fuera del país que estaban en solidaridad con nosotros.
Y ahí nos enteramos que había una gran solidaridad, había un gran movimiento en el mundo por los 4 condenados a muerte de la Fuerza Aérea. Y por lo tanto, al considerar un atenuante, todas las penas bajan un grado, a 30 años y un día.
When we were hearing about the refugees that were coming, and it was through the Chile Solidarity Committee, that's how we heard a lot of things. We wondered what are we going to do, how can we help here?
When the coup happened, people thought, we've got to do something. A number of NGOs, churches and other bodies got together and set up the Joint Working Group for Chilean Refugees. You had groups like Oxfam, Amnesty.
Even people who were not necessarily sympathetic to the Allende government were outraged and appalled by what was happening in Chile.
But ordinary people were identifying with Chileans.
The government had changed in March. There was some outrage, I think, in British opinion that Britain wasn't doing its fair share.
It is totally alien to the British tradition. And it's in such stark contrast to the way that other European countries, common market countries, are treating refugees from Chile.
Even the Americans were allowing some people with contacts, but Britain had done very little. And therefore we urged the new Labour government to change the policy and start issuing visas. And that policy came in immediately.
Judith Hart became the Minister for Overseas Development, and she diverted money that Britain had previously given in aid to create a programme for Chilean refugee academics and those who would benefit from studying in Britain.
But it was defined very, very widely. With ingenuity, we had musicians coming over, archaeologists coming over. We made up that in some way that they would help to contribute to Chile's development in the future.
After about a year of the programme, mid-75, we'd given about 100 awards and so on. People weren't coming. People who should have been coming weren't coming. Visas had not been issued. And we discovered that there were extraordinary delays taking place, both in the Foreign Office and in the Home Office, up to 6 months of people who were in danger.
Every Chilean who came into this country in the period that I was responsible for immigration policy had to be vetted to ensure that they were not a security risk. They were vetted by the intelligence service getting information from either from Chile or from the CIA, which in my view was a ludicrous situation, having regard to what the CIA had done in Chile. And most of that information I found to be valueless for that reason.
El primer resultado de la solidaridad es que no nos fusilan. Ahí ya vimos el primer efecto directo de lo que significa un movimiento de solidaridad sólido, firme, consistente.
Over 500 Chilean political prisoners were adopted up and down the country for all different groups, churches, universities, trade unions. It was very, very effective in getting visas.
Como que nos apadrinaron. Y esa fue la razón que la mayoría de nosotros salimos de Inglaterra.
Yo viajé con mi esposa y mi hija de 5 años.
Me dijeron que me iban a expulsar, y nada más. Y con un sacerdote me entregó alguna información con respecto a la doctora Sheila Cassidy, que estaba detenida en Santiago. De Capuchinos al aeropuerto me llevaron con una escolta, que iban con policías en moto. Me hacen subir por la puerta de atrás del avión, con la cola. Y arriba veo 2 muchachas. Y cuando subo, una me dice: bienvenido a la libertad. Y en Londres nos recibió un muchacho de nombre Gordon.
We had been given permission, the Joint Working Group staff, to go up right to the immigration officer's desk and interpret.
Gordon fue mi primer contacto, digamos, este primer día de libertad. Y Gordon me saluda y yo le dije: solamente traigo noticias de Dr. Sheila Cassidy. Nos lleva a un hotel de un grupo de Human Rights. Eran 3 o 4 muchachas que llegaron a hacerme preguntas sobre ella. Así que bueno, la doctora Sheila Cassidy 10 días después, me parece, fue liberada.
The girls had made me a pair of jeans and they'd written on the waistband of the jeans the names of all the girls who had applied for English visas. And it folded up into the hem so that it was all hidden.
Me llevaron a otro lugar que me parece que era un local de Amnistía Internacional, donde había listas de nombres y ver si los conocía, si estaban vivos, si sabía si estaban muertos. Eran miles de personas que estaban ahí. Yo pasé toda una tarde en ese lugar y una persona de Amnistía Internacional se acercó a mí y con mi nombre, una vez que escuchó mi nombre, me dijo: usted está en la lista de personas que cambiaron por repuesto de aviones. Me empieza a explicar más sobre el trabajador en Escocia. Habían rehusado de enviar material bélico a Chile. Y no solamente yo, fueron varios prisioneros que fueron liberados gracias a esa acción. No solamente uno, fuimos varios. Me dijeron que éramos 7 en total. Cuando yo llegué a Londres, en ese lugar de Amnistía Internacional, me dijeron que eran 7 las personas que habían sido liberadas.
And he's still going strong, and he's back in Chile. Eh?
He's built himself a house. He's got a very good life.
Oh my goodness.
Any refugee who wanted to provide information either about their own background and their own treatment, and in particular about, for example, fellow prisoners, family members, other comrades who were either missing or imprisoned elsewhere, they were invited to come and give information to Amnesty.
You're asking me how it is that Amnesty would have had the information on the 7 prisoners who'd been released in exchange for the release of those airport parts. I've just no idea.
The fact I don't remember meeting with Humberto, it's neither here nor there. I mean, because I met so many people who came out from into exile, I could well have met him. But I certainly would have remembered had somebody told me that he had been exchanged for aero engines.
It's by no means unlikely that the Chilean government might have offered some exchange, such as the release of prisoners. And it would have made sense to release those who were in some way related, i.e. the Air Force prisoners. So I don't find it incredible that such an exchange would have been offered. I have slightly more difficulty in accepting who on the British side would have agreed and how that agreement would have been expressed.
Unless you get somebody, former Foreign Office, whatever, who wouldn't be able to tell you anyway because they're all sworn to secrecy. They sign whatever D notice. When they leave government, they have to keep their mouth shut, or else they'll lose their pensions and so on.
Cuando yo llegué a Londres, en ese lugar de Amnistía Internacional, me dijeron que eran 7 las personas que habían sido liberadas.
No, I don't think it is likely that it could have been like that. I mean, it's possible. I didn't know Judith Hart very well, but she was very, very keen on Chile and solidarity. And she could have might have informally suggested something. But I can't see the Home Office visa department entering into a bargain for the sake of the engines.
It may be that the story is sort of half or 2/3 true, in the sense that the Chileans did release these Air Force prisoners because they thought it might lead to expediting the situation with regard to the Rolls-Royce engines and perhaps other military supplies, and that they were willing to take the risk without necessarily having a concrete agreement. I also don't have difficulty in believing that, for instance, the British Air Force, in whatever contacts it routinely had with the Chilean Air Force, and that Rolls-Royce, the company, would have been more than happy for such a trade to take place.
I was actually born in the house that I live in at the moment. I think for the best union men have a passion and are consumed perhaps with their beliefs. I'd like to think a sense of moral justice was driving them.
So there's one letter I want to show you. This was sent about a month after the blacking. And the Chilean ambassador here in the UK writes to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Chile. And he says that in the Rolls-Royce case, the anti-Chilean position really comes from the shop stewards. And amongst the shop stewards, the 2 most important are the convener, Peter Lowe, and the Gillies, your dad. So he suggests that Peter and Doogie and their wives should be invited on a trip to Chile with expenses paid. And it's interesting because I've never seen their names mentioned anywhere else in documents from Rolls-Royce or from the British government, but they're here in a strictly confidential document from Chile.
Yeah.
The brother refused. But I doubt if that ever happened.
That would have been a waste of time. Doogie Gillis was completely incorruptible.
He obviously didn't know what they were dealing with, how they were dealing with, and how the people seen it.
I don't think my father was ever aware of that. Him or Peter. But that's the house I stay in just now.
It might have seemed a good idea to them, but it wasn't a good idea.
An Englishman who worked for the Chilean embassy for 2 years until he became unhappy at what he was being asked to do has brought us his own inside story.
British trade unionists were operating a boycott on arms for Chile. The trade unionists leading the opposition became important targets.
On several occasions, namely up in Scotland, I've been asked if we could do something to intimidate workers. They supplied at one stage the name of 2 trade union officials up there who they wanted roughed up, who were organising a campaign against the selling of engines and equipment.
Cooper says he refused to undertake any of these actions, and certainly there have been no instances of beaten-up leftists or intimidated Scottish workers. They're rather hard to intimidate, as a matter of fact.
Rough them up. Sounds good, doesn't it? These things were part of banter, you know, talking what would happen, what wouldn't happen. We say, I don't know if any of these new guys that's come in from down south to work in here, I don't know if they're here to spy on us, stuff like that. I knew, for instance, my phone was tapped. I knew that, but to rough us up.
That's amazing.
Jesus.
I'll show you there's one more message. This is Umberto, and he wanted to say a few things to you.
Okay, let's think that your actions actually help a lot of Chilean people to get out of prison. I'm really, really grateful, and I think I would have done the same for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for what you've done in solidarity with your fellow workers in a so far away country like Chile. Thank you very much.
Oh,
good. Cheers.
Cheers, yes.
That was nice. Well, that type of, that's smashing. But thanks are not required because, as he said, he would have done the same. It's you are either that way inclined where you will fight against injustices, or you're one of the 10-15% that suck up, that want to be in the camp of the power holders. And I suppose it's a question of levels of fear.
Do you want to stop for a moment?
Oh, I'm okay here. I mean, torture would terrify me. I don't know how I would respond under torture. But I could see that I'd probably end up being the person that was going to get tortured.
The number of times we heard from shop stewards and political active people, that could have been us. We would have been the ones there. We would have been murdered. We would have been tortured. Just disappeared. God knows what would have happened to my family as well. It's people that are just doing what we're doing, looking after their fellow man and women, children, trying to make a better life for them. The exact same things as we were doing then. At a time when the trade unions were strong and were able to demand things for the people. Unlike now.
mes después del empiezo del embargo en el Reino Unido,
sí,
yo encontré un documento desde el embajador británico acá en Santiago, como desde abril 74, que dice que a esa época habían 29 Hawker Hunters de servicio. Y que si el boicot sigue, significaba que después de un año quedan solamente 11, después de 2 años quedan solamente 3, y después de 3 años son todos pegados al suelo. ¿Eso es cierto?
Sí, eso fue disminuyendo la cantidad de aviones en servicio. Yo estaba en ese tiempo en Antofagasta, escuadrón líder de un grupo de Hawker Hunters. Tenía 16 aviones y tenía 3 aviones en vuelo o sea, 3 motores, porque los aviones estaban bien todos, pero menos los motores. Por supuesto que tuvo un impacto, porque estuvimos bastante tiempo sin motores, pero teníamos nosotros ya trabajando el sistema de mantenimiento con una forma bastante artesanal, porque era el tema de los álabes que se pican con piedrecillas que andan por ahí. Todo. Se hacían a mano los álabes con unas plantillas especiales para volverle la forma original.
Well, suppose if you were desperate, you could take a chance, but you're talking about hundreds of blades. It'd be kind of foolish. Between the static side and the rotating side, you've got to have a certain space. If it's too big, you don't get the compression in the engine. If it's too small, you get the blades catching and therefore causing a lot of damage. It's precision. Polished them by hand, I couldn't see it happen.
There's hundreds of them. Think of the number of people they'd have to employ to polish that by hand. That's crazy. That's bloody nonsense. It's done by machine.
So, but he's a general. He wouldn't understand about the mechanics of the internal part of the engine. My question would be, what about the main bearings? That is the real problem. And they've lain out the back for years. And I tell you from personal experience, these bearings would be useless, or it'd be very dangerous. You flow it in, the whole thing would crunch up and explode. No.
A fin de ese año yo tuve los 16 en vuelo ya. Pero faltaban bastante otros repuestos. Nosotros volábamos con asientos eyectables sin cartucho, ¿por qué no?
We've learned to be self-sufficient regarding British aircraft. I noticed it's copied for some reason to New Delhi, which might imply that they had some arrangement with the Indians, and Nairobi as well.
Y Israel nos ayudó harto. Bueno, Sudáfrica era uno de los que nos ayudaba también. Pero todo eso. India tenía hartos Hawker Hunter.
Mi padre fue piloto de Hawker Hunter en los 70s. Tenía más de 2000 y tantas horas de vuelo en jet de combate. Fue comandante de una unidad de Hawker Hunter. Voló desde muy joven los Hawker Hunter. Cuando mi padre murió el año 80, lo más probable es que haya sido una falla de mantenimiento del avión, ¿no? de algo que andaba mal en el avión. Varios pilotos fallecieron en esos días, en un tramo muy breve. Murió mi padre y el comandante de los Mirage de Brasil, que estaban en un avión dual, eran 2 Hawker contra 2 F-5, volando sobre el mar, haciendo un combate simulado. Mi padre lo vieron extendiendo, con la nariz abajo, se metió en las nubes y nunca más apareció. Nunca encontramos a mi padre. Ni una mancha en el agua, nada. Yo tenía 15 años.
The 4 engines that left early were the first engines to arrive in East Kilbride.
Right, okay.
The engines that arrived later, I now know that these were the engines that were used on the day of the coup. And these are the engines that stayed in East Kilbride for 4 years.
Ah, I see.
So you weren't just blacking some engines of the Chilean Air Force, you blacked the engines that were used on the day of the coup.
Ajá, ajá.
Nosotros teníamos ahí un tema vecinal complejo con la Argentina, porque teníamos una disputa por las islas cercanas al Cabo de Hornos. A principios del año 78, que lo recuerdo muy bien, me recibí con 3 aviones que tenían motor para volar. En el grupo del lado no había más de 5, que era el de instrucción. Y eso era todo, una posición difícil.
I wish I thought of that before I started the coup.
So, I overthrow a democratically elected government. I start torturing anybody who supports them. I shoot people, I murder and kill them. As a result of this, people in Scotland take action. And they're responsible for Chile getting weakened. No, the people who took the first action, who overthrew them, they're responsible.
Scotland's got a history of people going to fight in the Spanish Civil War, where a similar type of thing happened, where democratic government was overthrown, fascists supported by Hitler. In Chile, a democratic government was overthrown by fascists supported by the CIA in America, so there's similarities.
You know, you do one small action, like Bob did that action, came to me and we went and blacked these engines. We had no idea where that would go. But sometimes, you know, the butterfly flaps its wings and there's a storm the other side of the world.
El más anciano que empezó todo, él dice, era cristiano y era veterano de la Segunda Guerra Mundial. Dictadura para él era una palabra fea. Y después los sindicatos lo hizo la acción algo más política, pero el inicio fue algo más humanitario.
El hombre es muy extraño porque, bueno, la idea precede a la acción, entonces alguien le pone la idea en la cabeza. A lo mejor la persona no quiere hacerlo o no ha pensado hacerlo, pero le ponen la idea. Y estamos viendo en los islámicos, ¿no es cierto? Como se portan como peor que animales. Increíble.
From Bob's point of view, he would understand that certain wars could possibly be justified, but the actions of the Chilean junta were completely unjustified. It wasn't war. It was army-sanctioned terrorism against the people of Chile and the government of Chile.
No comprendo que no quiera que maten gente civil, digamos. O sea, pero no se mató ninguno con un Hunter, ninguno. Ni se hirió. El bombardeo a la moneda se fue muy preciso. Lo hicimos con rocket Sura, porque tiene una trayectoria tensa, precisa. Una bomba deja la crema. El cohete era mucho más preciso y produce menos daño también.
¿Qué cantidad de munición se disparan los cañones, comandante?
Bueno, estos cohetes son del tipo Sura y la distancia de tiro son 900 yardas, lo que equivale a aproximadamente 800 metros. Tenemos de dos tipos también, unos penetrantes y los otros son explosivos incendiarios.
¿Y usted era piloto en ese día?
Yo era piloto de Hawker Hunter, pero...
¿Pero en ese día?
No, ese día no volé, no tenía otra... Estaba a cargo del grupo, en tierra, entonces... nunca salía el nombre del piloto.
compañeros merecen el agradecimiento de todo un pueblo que se vio sometido a una dictadura fascista. Gracias por haber sido tan consecuente.
Su tarea posiblemente ellos la verán como muy pequeña, una anécdota, además ni siquiera se supo, pero sí tiene un gran valor, tuvo una gran importancia, ¿no? Les estaba demostrando a los dictadores en Chile de que más que el apoyo de determinados gobiernos, ellos tenían el repudio, el rechazo de la mayoría de los seres humanos.
Uno agradece de corazón la solidaridad de gente tan lejana que puede palpitar el mismo sentimiento que uno. Es decir, lo que demuestra de que algún día todos podamos ser hermanos, ¿no? El mundo puede ser capaz de alimentar a todos sus habitantes.
Gracias a ustedes. Gracias a su pueblo.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Lord.
We are here today to honor three gentlemen, Mr. Bob Fulton, Mr. Robert Somerville, and Mr. John Keenan. I would like to express, on behalf of the Chilean President Michelle Bachelet and the people of Chile, our endless gratitude and appreciation. The Order Bernardo Higgins is the greatest distinction our country gives to foreigners. It was established in 1965 and named after the founder and liberator of our republic. Let me invite to stand up the gentleman that we will pay homage to. Mr. Bob Fulton.
I am deeply grateful and honoured.
The President of the Republic of Chile confers the Order Bernardo O'Higgins in the rank of Commander to Mr. Robert Somerville.
Thanks really very much for what you have done by my country. Thank you very much.
The President of the Republic of Chile confers the Order Bernardo O'Higgins in the rank of Commander to Mr. John Keenan.
Your Excellency, thanks very much for coming here. We're the people who have been named today, but it was the workers in the factory. It was an international act of solidarity for workers in our part of the world, and we were very, very proud to be part of that history.
Your Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, and all my Chilean friends who I haven't seen for a while. This honour is really unbelievable. What words can you say? But the solidarity that was shown then, we should keep showing now, and keep trade unionism to the front and fight for the rights of the workers, no matter where they are. Thank you.
I don't know what I'm going to say, but I'm going to say something. Ladies and gentlemen, today I have been so deeply honoured for what happened so long ago. We are at one with the people of Chile, and not so long ago, the people of Scotland showed to the nations of the world what democracy is all about and what it stands for. And I am very proud to be Scotch and a Glaswegian. And I am now equally honoured to be that part of democracy that is now in Chile. I thank you all for listening to me and trust that in the future the great democracy will continue to grow. Thank you so much. I appreciate it very much.
En el año 2005, los Hawker Hunter habían dejado de volar ya en Chile. La Fuerza Aérea puso todo el paquete de repuestos en un remate. Eran 32 motores, más un paquete grande de repuestos. La idea era al menos tener un recuerdo de mi padre. Por suerte, mi socio en este emprendimiento tenía un terreno a 1 hora de Santiago y decidimos trasladar y poner los motores en un prado, ahí, en un terreno donde hay maleza, ahí estaban tirados solamente los motores, esperando mejor suerte.
1507. C1. Ese uno que se fue en 75. 15607. Ya. Tema 1.
Right.
Did you get any of the plates with numbers on it? No.
The plates had been ripped on most of them. Only one of them still had the serial number plate on it. And this one here at the back.
Did it tie up?
Yeah, that's the very first engine to come into the factory, which is very likely that's the engine that Bob Fulton blacked.
Has he had it? Aye, 15607.
And it'll take about 2 hours to get this flight worthy. Okay.
It was quite emotional.
There's nothing wrong with that.
No, I don't suppose so. Not when you get to 90 odds anyway. It comes too easy sometimes.
I suppose as I get older, I have a different view of humanity in general. But it is a fine balance. You know, you get people who move entirely from ego-driven self-interest. On the other side, folk who are concerned about generosity of spirit and helping their fellow man. And I think some people do the best they can, and some people don't.